Hi everyone, it's John Mitchell. In this video we're going to look at conflict and dispute resolution. So under a decentralised system, the human resource manager, or one of the roles of the human resource manager, is to resolve disputes, because the negotiation and dispute resolution sort of happens at enterprise level. So what I'm going to do here is just sort of look at conflict on its own, and then we'll look at some different methods that can arise on methods on how we can actually resolve disputes. So conflict can arise for a lot of different reasons. So it can obviously arise during negotiation period, which is obviously linked to pay and conditions. Can be issues around job security, managerial policies, discipline issues, health and safety issues in the workplace, and anything in between. The main sort of area we're focusing here is obviously on employee relations. So we'll sort of really have a focus on, during negotiation, on pay and conditions and job security, those types of things that come up in employer relations. So just common types of industrial action that people can take, that employees or organisations can take along with their unions or representatives to, I suppose, show their importance during a dispute. So a strike where employees withdraw themselves from the work for a period of time, that's one of the most common ones. A lockout is a little bit similar, but from the employer perspective, where the employer actually closes down the workplace for a period of time to stop the employees coming in. That means they can't come to work and can't get paid. Picket lines is where groups of employees will protest outside the workplace, and often what they'll try and do is stop suppliers or non-union members from entering into the organisation. Work to rules, where workers refuse to perform duties outside their job description, because often what happens is that an employee has obviously got their job description, but they'll, most employers do many other things that are involved in their job, and they're happy to do those. But a work to rule is where they just perform things that are in their job description. And a work ban is a refusal to some form of work, such as overtime, which, for organisations like the fire departments, for the police, transport, those types, even construction, where they do overtime, rely heavily on overtime, that can hurt those types of organisations. So they're just some of the types of industrial action that take place to really, one party over the other, to show their importance that, well, if you're not going to really negotiate with us, then this is what we're going to do to try and force you back to the table. Now, with industrial action, we need to know, is it protected or unprotected? So protected action is action taken that is approved by the Fair Work Commission. And what will happen is that if a union or a group of employees want to take industrial action, or an organisation wants to take industrial action, then they will apply for that to be protected by Fair Work Commission. So they'll lodge a form and say, this is the action we're trying to take, or we want to take, and then the Fair Work Commission can either tick that off, which means it's then called protected action, and they can't then be sued or anything like that for damages. So in order for it to be protected action, these are some of the things that need to sort of be ticked off, some of the requirements that must be met. So it needs to be during a bargaining period, and when an existing agreement has passed its expiry date, so they're looking for a new agreement. The parties have genuinely tried to reach an agreement, so Fair Work won't actually approve it unless initially they've tried to resolve the agreement themselves. Authorised by a ballot, which is virtually a vote, and a secret ballot where employees will write down on paper whether they vote yes or no for it, and then it needs to be 50% agree yes for the industrial action. And if the employers have to be given the required notice, and that's sort of stipulated on the Fair Work, as long as employers have been given enough notice of the action that's going to be taken. Now, if those things haven't been met, then it's unprotected action, or if Fair Work hasn't actually approved it, then it's unprotected action. Now, that is unlawful action, and damages can be sought if that is required. Now, we look at methods for resolving conflicts. So when a dispute arises, it's important it's resolved quickly, obviously, because we want to get employees. First of all, we want to manage the relationship, or maintain a positive relationship, and also we want to get employees back to work being productive as quickly as possible. So there's a number of ways that this can happen. So first of all, there's a grievance procedure, which is a formal process where an employee can resolve matters relating to complaints about wages, conditions, and disciplinary action. This is an internal organisation type thing where disputes are resolved within the organisation. And so let's have a look at an example. It could be that a complainant tries to settle the disputes themselves, and if that doesn't work, if that is solved, then obviously it's done. If that if it's not solved, then it might go, the complaint might be handled by a supervisor, might be taken to a supervisor, and they may try and work through the dispute between the two parties. And again, if that's not resolved then it may go to middle management or a department manager, and on all the way up to top management. And then if it isn't resolved, then it might go through conciliation or arbitration. And so it's just a set of procedures. This is a really basic one, but that's just a set of procedures that an employee can do if they've got some kind of grievance or some kind of dispute. This is the process that actually takes place. Often it will start quite informal, where there's a dispute, we'll just try and sort it out ourselves, and then it can become more and more formal as it goes up the chain, where it's all recorded and those types of things. So it's just that should be put into place at most organisations, or it should be put in place at all organisations, but most organisations have some form of grievance procedure on how disputes are to be resolved. Negotiation, we've spoken about this before, coming to an agreement through discussions and compromise. No third party involvement there. Two-way communication is important. Just the two parties or the disputing parties are getting together and try and work out some kind of compromise to finalise or come to an agreement. Then if that doesn't work, what they can do is mediation, which is a formal method where a third party facilitates the conversation. The parties still come to their own agreement, and the third party is independent and agreed upon by the parties in the dispute. However, it's the third party doesn't really have any involvement in terms of making suggestions or anything like that. They're just there to ensure that the two parties, if the communication's broken down between the two, that they facilitate that conversation. And that can really help getting the disputing parties working together again and communicating to try and come to some form of an agreement. And again, if that doesn't work, we can do conciliation, which we've spoken about in previous videos, but it's a formal method where a third party is actively involved in facilitating the negotiation. Now, actively involved means that they can make suggestions and give advice to the two party or the disputing parties. They can make orders, for them to go away for another 2 weeks, come back, and then we'll, try and negotiate again. So the third party is more involved in making suggestions. It's the conciliator's job to help the parties reach a solution, lead the discussion and provide guidance. So that's where, the advice and suggestions come in and providing guidance. Ensure conversations remain polite and on topic, and also explore the issues involved. So whatever issues arise in a dispute, to explore those fully to try and help them come to an agreement. And finally, if conciliation hasn't worked, then what might happen is arbitration, where both parties put their case forward to a judge and the judge makes the final decision. So hearings are more formal than conferences and are generally on the record. So I've got a picture there of the Qantas CEO where they've gone to arbitration to resolve disputes before. So what the issue with that, what can happen is if it's completely broken down, is that, all right, takes it out of our hands, we both put our case forward and then someone else makes the decision for us. But the issue with that is that it could be that one party is happy over the other, or it could be that both parties are really happy with the outcome, or it could be that no parties are happy with the outcome. And that decision is obviously binding by law. So once that decision is made, it's final, and both parties obviously have to carry out that agreement, whatever decision has been made. So it has some issues but if things are broken down completely, then that may be the only way to go. So just to recap, industrial action can be protected and unprotected. It's important that you know what those two terms mean and what sort of determines protected and unprotected action. And then in terms of resolving conflict, we can have a grievance procedure. It's important that organisations have a grievance procedure in place so that any kind of dispute that arises within the organisation, the employee knows what's the process to resolve that dispute. Then we also have negotiation, mediation, where there's a third party involved but no real suggestions made, just facilitating the conversation. Conciliation has a little bit more involvement, again an independent third party, but a little bit more involvement in terms of making suggestions and giving advice. And arbitration, again a third party or a judge then makes a final decision after the two parties have put their ideas forward. So for questions, activities and more on this video, then come on over to teachingbubble.com.